Hey there, horror enthusiasts. Today, we're going to dive into the world of camping horror, where the chills and thrills are in full swing. So, if you're a fan of the spine-tingling, the pulse-pounding, and the downright scary, then camping horror is definitely your cup of tea. Thanks for joining us today, and don't forget to follow and subscribe for more thrilling content. Stay spooky, my friends. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows of the ranger station. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the already fading light of the late afternoon. It had been like this for days, an endless torrent that seemed determined to wash away the entire Adirondack wilderness. I huddled closer to the wood-burning stove, the flames casting flickering shadows on the rough-hewn walls. It was the only source of warmth and light in this isolated outpost, miles from any semblance of civilization. I hadn't seen a single visitor for a week. The storm had kept everyone away, which was unusual, even for this time of year. Usually, there'd be at least a few hardy hikers or fishermen braving the elements, seeking refuge in the station's rustic comforts. But not this time. It was just me, the relentless storm, and the oppressive silence of the mountains. A shiver ran down my spine, and it wasn't just from the cold. There was a strange feeling in the air, a prickling sensation that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was like something was watching me, something unseen lurking in the shadows just beyond the reach of the firelight. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just the isolation and the storm playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, a gnawing sense of unease refused to be silenced. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the swirling mist, a man stumbling towards the station. He was drenched to the bone, his clothes plastered to his gaunt frame. He looked wild-eyed and desperate, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I hurried to the door, a flicker of relief momentarily banishing the unease. Finally, another human being. "Help me," he rasped, his voice hoarse and strained. "Please, you have to help me." I pulled him inside, ushering him towards the warmth of the stove. "What's wrong? What happened?" He just shook his head, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. "They're coming," he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming for us." "Who's coming?" I asked, concern growing in my voice. He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling. "But they're here. I can feel them." He wouldn't tell me his name or what he was doing out in the storm. He just kept muttering about them and how they were going to get us. There was something deeply unsettling about him, something that made my instincts scream at me to be cautious. Hours crawled by. The storm raged outside, and the strange man remained huddled by the stove, his eyes fixed on the flames, muttering incoherently. I tried to engage him in conversation, to glean some information about who he was and what he was so afraid of, but my attempts were met with evasive answers and a growing sense of panic. "You have to lock the doors," he suddenly hissed, his voice raspy and urgent. "Don't let anyone else in. They can't get you if you don't let them in." "Who can't get me?" I asked, my voice tight with apprehension. "What are you talking about?" He shook his head, his eyes wide with fear. "I can't tell you." You wouldn't believe me. But you have to trust me. They're out there, waiting. They can't be seen, can't be heard, not until it's too late. His words sent a chill down my spine. I glanced towards the door, half expecting to see something sinister lurking just outside. The wind howled, and the windows rattled, as if something was trying to force its way in. You have to barricade the door, the man insisted, his voice rising in pitch. And the windows. They can't get through solid barriers. Not yet. He scrambled to his feet, his movements jerky and erratic. He started pacing the room, his eyes darting around as if searching for unseen threats. He was clearly in the grip of some kind of paranoia, but there was something in his frantic demeanor that made it hard to dismiss his warnings entirely. Suddenly, he lurched towards the door, fumbling with the lock. I have to get out of here, he muttered. I have to warn them. I grabbed his arm, trying to restrain him. Warn who? Who are you talking about? He struggled against my grip, his eyes wild. They're coming, he gasped. They're coming for all of us. He wrenched his arm free and stumbled towards the door again. But before he could reach it, he collapsed to the floor, his body racked with tremors. I knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. It was weak and thready. He was burning with fever. I realized then that he wasn't just scared. He was sick, delirious. But even in his feverish state, his words echoed in my mind, fueling the growing sense of dread that had taken root in my gut. They're coming. Who were they? And what did they want? The man's collapse sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I was alone, cut off from the outside world, with a delirious stranger who kept muttering about unseen threats. I felt a desperate urge to flee, to abandon the station and run as far away from this place as possible. But I couldn't leave him. He was sick, vulnerable. It went against every instinct I had as a park ranger to abandon someone in need. I checked his pulse again. It was still faint, but steady. He was alive, at least for now. I covered him with a blanket and tried to make him comfortable. Then, I turned my attention to the outside world, hoping to find some way to contact help. I picked up the phone, but the line was dead. Static crackled through the receiver, a chilling reminder of my isolation. I tried the radio, but all I got was a cacophony of white noise. The storm had completely severed my connection to the outside world. A sense of dread washed over me. I was trapped, alone with a madman and whatever horrors he believed were lurking outside. I paced the room, my mind racing, trying to come up with a plan. Should I try to leave on foot? Could I make it through the storm to the nearest town? Just as I was about to give in to despair, a knock echoed through the station. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who could that be? The man's words echoed in my mind, "Don't let anyone else in." I cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. A figure stood on the porch, silhouetted against the swirling mist. It was a young man, his face pale and drawn, his clothes soaked through. He looked exhausted and terrified. He saw me and let out a sigh of relief. "Thank God," he said, his voice trembling. Can you help me? I'm lost. I've been hiking for hours, and I can't find my way back to the trail. I hesitated, torn between my duty to help and the strange man's warning. But the hiker looked so desperate, so vulnerable. I couldn't just leave him out there in the storm. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and let him in. The hiker practically fell through the doorway, his relief palpable. He slammed the door shut behind him, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and gratitude. He was young, maybe early 20s, with a shock of unruly brown hair and a thin, athletic build. His backpack was soaked, and his face was streaked with mud and rain. "Thank you," he gasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I thought I was done for. I've been wandering for hours. Lost the trail in the storm. I forced a smile, trying to project an air of calm I didn't feel. "You're safe now. Come in, get warm." I led him over to the stove, where the strange man still lay huddled under the blanket. He hadn't moved since collapsing, but his eyes were open, watching the hiker with an unnerving intensity. "Who's that?" the hiker asked, his voice wary. He came in a while ago," I stammered, unsure how to explain the man's bizarre behavior. "He's not feeling well." The hiker nodded, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. I couldn't blame him. The whole situation was unsettling, even to me. "I'm Ben," the hiker said, extending a hand. "Alex," I replied, shaking it. Ben sat down by the stove, his gaze flickering nervously between me and the strange man. "What's wrong with him?" he asked, his voice low. "I don't know," I admitted. "He's been delirious, talking about things." I decided not to mention the man's warnings about them. I didn't want to scare Ben any more than he already was. Besides, I still wasn't sure if the man was just crazy or if there was something more to his ramblings. "This storm is insane," Ben said, breaking the tense silence. "I've never seen anything like it." I nodded in agreement. The storm seemed to be growing in intensity, the wind howling like a chorus of tormented spirits. The windows rattled violently, and the old ranger station creaked and groaned under the onslaught. "Do you think it will let up soon?" Ben asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. I shook my head. "I don't know." The forecast wasn't good. A heavy silence settled over the room. I could feel Ben's eyes on me, and I knew he could sense my unease. I tried to act normal, to maintain a facade of calm, but it was getting harder by the minute. The strange man's warnings, the dead phone lines, the relentless storm, it all added up to a growing sense of dread that I couldn't shake off. The silence was shattered by a sudden, ear-splitting shriek. It came from the strange man. He shot up from beneath the blanket, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his face contorted in a mask of terror. He scrambled back from Ben, his hands clawing at the floor, his body trembling violently. "They're here," he screamed, his voice raw and guttural. "I can feel them. They're inside." Ben jumped to his feet, his eyes wide with alarm. What's happening? Who's here? I didn't know what to say. The man's outburst was terrifying, and I could see the fear growing in Ben's eyes. I tried to calm them both, but my words felt hollow even to my own ears. The strange man continued to shriek and writhe on the floor, his body contorting in unnatural ways. He began scratching at the walls, leaving deep gouges in the wood paneling. His fingernails seemed to lengthen and thicken, becoming more like claws. "He's sick," I said to Ben, trying to sound reassuring. "He needs help." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. There was something deeply wrong with the man, something that went beyond any illness I had ever seen. He suddenly stopped scratching and turned his head towards us. His eyes were completely black, the pupils dilated to the point where they consumed the entire iris. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Ben gasped and stumbled back. "What the hell is wrong with him?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too horrified by what I was seeing. The man was no longer human. Something else had taken over, something dark and malevolent. He lunged at Ben, his clawed hands reaching out. Ben cried out and dodged out of the way, narrowly avoiding the attack. The man crashed into the wall, leaving a deep dent in the wood. I knew then that we weren't safe. We had to get out of there. "Come on!" I yelled to Ben, grabbing his arm. "We have to go." We ran towards the door, the man's screams echoing behind us. He was on his feet again, scrambling after us, his movements inhumanly fast. We burst out of the station and into the storm. The wind and rain lashed at us, blinding and disorienting. But we couldn't stop. We had to keep running. As we fled into the darkness, I could hear the man's chilling laughter echoing through the trees. It was a sound that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. The storm raged around us, the wind screaming like 1,000 tortured souls. Rain lashed at our faces, blurring our vision. We stumbled through the undergrowth, branches whipping at our skin, thorns tearing at our clothes. But we didn't dare slow down. The chilling laughter continued to echo through the trees, a constant reminder of the horror we were fleeing. "Where are we going?" Ben gasped, his voice barely audible above the wind. "I don't know," I yelled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "Just away from that thing." I could hear Ben's ragged breathing beside me, his footsteps heavy and uneven. He was exhausted, terrified. But he kept running. We both did. We had to. We burst out of the thick undergrowth and into a small clearing. The ranger station was no longer visible, swallowed by the darkness and the storm. But the laughter was still there, closer now, mocking our desperate flight. "We have to hide," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We crouched behind a large fallen log, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my senses heightened. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through me. I reached into my backpack and pulled out my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the dense forest surrounding us. But there was no sign of our pursuer. "Do you think we lost it?" Ben whispered, his voice filled with hope. I shook my head. I don't know. But we can't stay here. We need to keep moving. I pulled out my ranger's kit, checking the contents. I had a first aid kit, a compass, a map, and my service weapon, a Glock 17. It wasn't much, but it was something. Do you know how to use that? Ben asked, his eyes fixed on the gun. I nodded. I'm a park ranger. It's part of the job. I checked the magazine. It was full. I chambered around, the metallic click echoing in the silence. I felt a surge of confidence, a sense of control in the face of overwhelming fear. Come on, I said, my voice firmer now. Let's go. We moved cautiously through the clearing, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The laughter had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was even more unsettling. It felt like we were being watched, hunted. As we reached the edge of the clearing, I saw something move in the shadows. A dark shape, tall and slender, with long, spindly limbs. It was moving towards us, slowly, deliberately. I raised the gun, my finger tightening on the trigger. Who's there? I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. The figure didn't answer. It just kept coming, its movements fluid and unnatural. I knew then that we were not alone. Whatever was out there, it was not human. And it was coming for us. The figure emerged from the shadows, and my breath caught in my throat. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs impossibly long and thin, like a spider's legs. Its skin was pale and translucent, almost glowing in the darkness. Its head was elongated, with no discernible features, just a smooth, blank surface. It moved with an eerie grace, gliding over the uneven ground as if it were floating. It made no sound, its footsteps silent on the forest floor. It was like something out of a nightmare, a creature that defied all the laws of nature. I tightened my grip on the gun, my finger hovering over the trigger. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in ragged gasps. Fear threatened to overwhelm me, but I fought it back. I had to stay calm. I had to protect Ben. Stay behind me, I whispered to Ben, my voice trembling. He nodded, his eyes wide with terror. He clutched at my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. The creature stopped a few feet away from us, its blank face tilted slightly, as if studying us. I could feel its presence, a cold, malevolent energy that seemed to drain the warmth from my body. I raised the gun, aiming for the creature's head. Stay back. I yelled, my voice cracking with fear. The creature didn't react. It just stood there, its blank face staring at us. I squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the forest, the sound deafening in the silence. The creature didn't flinch. The bullet seemed to pass right through it, leaving no mark. I fired again, and again, but it had no effect. The creature remained unfazed, its blank face still fixed on us. A wave of despair washed over me. I had no weapon that could harm this thing. We were completely defenseless. The creature took a step towards us. then another. It was slow, deliberate, as if savoring our fear. I grabbed Ben's hand and pulled him back. "Run!" I yelled. We turned and fled, the creature's silent pursuit close behind us. We scrambled through the undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces, thorns tearing at our clothes. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. The creature was faster. It glided over the uneven ground with ease, its long limbs carrying it effortlessly through the forest. It was gaining on us. I could hear its soft footsteps behind us, closing the distance. I could feel its cold presence, like a shadow creeping over my soul. We were running out of time. We stumbled into another clearing, this one larger than the last. The moon peeked through the storm clouds, casting an eerie glow over the scene. I could see the creature now, standing at the edge of the clearing, its silhouette stark against the pale moonlight. It was waiting for us. We had nowhere to run. We were surrounded by trees, the forest closing in on all sides. There was no escape. I pushed Ben behind me, shielding him with my body. I raised the gun again, my finger trembling on the trigger. I knew it was useless, but I had to do something. Stay back. I yelled, my voice hoarse and desperate. The creature didn't move. It just stood there, its blank face staring at us, its presence filling the clearing with a suffocating dread. Then it began to change. Its body rippled and distorted, its limbs lengthening and contorting. Its skin stretched and thinned, becoming almost translucent. Its head elongated, the blank face disappearing, replaced by a gaping maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. It was no longer humanoid. It was something monstrous, something out of the darkest depths of a nightmare. I screamed, the sound echoing through the clearing. Ben whimpered behind me, his body shaking with fear. The creature lunged. I fired the gun, emptying the entire magazine into its grotesque form. But the bullets had no effect. They passed right through it, leaving no mark. The creature was upon us. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the attack never came. I opened my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature was gone. Vanished. I looked around, searching the clearing for any sign of it. But there was nothing. Only the trees, the moon, and the storm. We were alone. But the silence was deafening. It was a silence filled with dread, a silence that screamed of unseen horrors lurking just beyond our perception. I knew then that we were not safe. We had escaped this creature, but there were others. They were out there, in the darkness, waiting for us. And they would find us. The silence was broken by a blood-curdling scream. It wasn't my scream, nor was it the creature's. It was Ben's. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. Ben was no longer behind me. He was several yards away, running blindly towards the tree-line, his face contorted in terror. And then I saw them. They weren't just one creature. There were dozens of them, maybe even hundreds. They emerged from the darkness, their forms shifting and distorting, their limbs elongated and grotesque. They were like a swarm of nightmares, their presence suffocating, their silence more terrifying than any scream. They converged on Ben, their movements swift and silent. He tripped and fell, his scream cut short as they descended upon him. I watched in horror, paralyzed by fear, as they engulfed him, their forms merging and shifting, their limbs intertwining, their mouths opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even scream. I was frozen, trapped in a nightmare, watching as Ben was consumed by the darkness. Then, as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. Vanished into the night, leaving behind only an echoing silence and the lingering scent of something ancient and foul. I stumbled towards the spot where Ben had fallen, my legs shaking, my body trembling. There was nothing left of him. No blood, no bones, no trace that he had ever existed. He was gone. I sank to my knees, my mind reeling, my stomach churning. I had failed him. I had brought him here, to this place of horrors, and now he was gone. I looked up at the moon, its pale light casting long shadows across the clearing. The storm had subsided, the wind reduced to a gentle breeze. The forest was silent, but it was a silence that held 1,000 unspoken horrors. I knew then that I had to leave. I had to escape this place, this nightmare. I had to get back to civilization, to the world of light and reason. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, my mind numbed. I turned and ran, fleeing the clearing, fleeing the forest, fleeing the horrors that lurked within. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I knew that if I did, I would see them, waiting for me, their forms shifting and distorting in the darkness. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I ran until I collapsed, exhausted and broken, on the edge of the forest. And even then, I didn't stop. I crawled, dragged myself along the ground, until I reached the road. I lay there, gasping for breath, my body trembling, my mind filled with the horrors I had witnessed. I had escaped, but I knew that I would never be the same. The Adirondacks had changed me. They had shown me the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the world, the horrors that hid in the shadows. And I would never forget. I made it back to civilization, battered and bruised, my mind teetering on the brink of madness. I told my story to anyone who would listen, the police, the park rangers, the doctors. But no one believed me. They said I was suffering from shock, from exposure, from the trauma of being lost in the wilderness. They were wrong. I knew what I had seen. I knew what had happened. The Adirondacks were not what they seemed. There was a darkness there, an ancient evil that lurked beneath the surface, waiting to consume those who strayed too far from the beaten path. I tried to warn people, to tell them to stay away from the mountains. But they just laughed, dismissing me as a crazy old man. They didn't understand. They couldn't. I left the Adirondacks, but the Adirondacks never left me. The memories haunted me, the nightmares plagued me. I could still see Ben's face, contorted in terror, as the creatures descended upon him. I could still hear his screams echoing in the silence of the night. I tried to move on, to rebuild my life. But the past was always there, a shadow hanging over me, a constant reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. I became a recluse, shutting myself off from the world. I couldn't bear to be around people, to see their faces, to hear their laughter. It was a constant reminder of what I had lost. I spent my days wandering the streets, a ghost among the living. I watched the people go about their lives, oblivious to the darkness that lurked just beyond their perception. I wanted to warn them, to tell them to be careful. But I knew it was pointless. They wouldn't believe me. So I remained silent, a prisoner of my own memories, haunted by the horrors of the Adirondacks. And I waited. I waited for the day when they would return. I knew they would. They always did. They were out there, in the darkness, watching, waiting. And one day, they would come for me. Sarah's always been a bit of a lone wolf. Not in a weird way, just independent. Hiking's her thing. Me? I'm more of a Netflix and chill kind of guy. So when she started planning this solo trip to the Black Hills, I was a little uneasy, but I tried to play it cool. "It'll be good for you," I said, trying to sound all supportive and whatnot. Truth is, I hate the idea of her being out there all alone. Those woods are dense, man. Real dense. I read this article once about a guy who got lost out there, just vanished off the face of the earth. Never found him. Anyway, I drove her to the trailhead early Friday morning. She was all decked out in her hiking gear, those sturdy boots she loves, cargo pants with a million pockets, and that ridiculous hat with the mosquito netting. She looked like she was ready to trek across the Amazon, not just spend a few days in South Dakota. "Got everything?" I asked, for like the 10th time. "Yep," she said, giving me that quick, confident smile that always makes my stomach do a flip-flop. "Map, compass, first aid kit, bear spray, the works." "Okay, good. Just be careful, all right?" She laughed, that light, airy laugh that makes her sound like a Disney princess. "Always am. Don't worry so much, I'll be fine." And with that, she slung her backpack over her shoulders, gave me a quick hug that smelled like sunscreen and bug spray, and headed off into the woods. I watched her go, that uneasy feeling twisting in my gut. I hung around the parking lot for a while, just staring at the trailhead, feeling the knot of worry tighten with every passing minute. Finally, I told myself to snap out of it. She's a grown woman, perfectly capable of taking care of herself. I got back in my car, cranked up the AC, and headed home. But the whole drive back, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. The next day was Saturday. I woke up with that same nagging feeling in my gut. Tried to shake it off, told myself Sarah was probably fine, just enjoying the peace and quiet. But I couldn't help checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for a text. Nothing. To distract myself, I decided to tackle that mountain of laundry that had been piling up for weeks. Seriously, it was like Mount Everest in my laundry basket. As I was sorting through the clothes, I found Sarah's favorite flannel shirt, the one she always wears when we go camping. It still smelled like her, that faint scent of wood smoke and vanilla. I held it up to my face for a moment, just breathing in that familiar scent, and suddenly that feeling of dread came back full force. I tossed the shirt into the laundry basket and tried to focus on the task at hand. The day dragged on. I tried watching some TV, but nothing held my interest. I tried reading, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. All I could think about was Sarah out there in the woods, alone. Finally, around midday, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. I practically ripped my phone out of my pocket and tore into the message. Having a great time. Trail is beautiful. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. See? I told myself. She's fine. Just overreacting as usual. I typed back a quick reply, glad to hear it. Stay safe. Then I went back to my laundry, feeling a little lighter, a little less like the world was about to end. I even managed to fold a few shirts without getting distracted. Progress. Sunday morning rolled around, and I woke up feeling off. Like something was just not right. Couldn't put my finger on it, but that knot in my stomach was back with a vengeance. I checked my phone. No new messages from Sarah. She's probably just busy hiking, I muttered to myself, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But the doubt was creeping in. Usually, she'd send at least one text a day, just to check in. I tried to go about my usual Sunday routine, coffee, pancakes, maybe catch a game later. But I couldn't focus. Every little creak in the house made me jump. Every time my phone buzzed, which was just spam calls, of course, my heart would leap into my throat. Finally, in the afternoon, my phone actually did buzz with a new message. Sarah. I snatched it up, eager to hear how she was doing. But as I read the message, a chill ran down my spine. So peaceful here. No one around for miles. Just the sounds of nature. Okay, on the surface, it seemed normal enough. But something about it felt wrong. First of all, no emojis. Sarah loves her emojis. Every text is usually peppered with little smiley faces, hearts, whatever. This was just plain text. And the wording itself. So peaceful. No one around for miles. It was like she was trying too hard to sound okay. Like she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine. I read the message again and again, each time that feeling of unease growing stronger. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. Something was definitely off. Monday was a blur. I went to work, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. My boss kept shooting me these weird looks, probably wondering why I was staring blankly at my computer screen instead of doing actual work. I tried to explain that my girlfriend was missing in the wilderness, but it came out sounding like some lame excuse a kid would make to get out of a test. I spent most of the day refreshing my inbox, hoping for another message from Sarah. But nothing came. By the time I left work, I was a wreck. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the traffic around me. When I got back to my apartment, I did the first thing that came to mind. I grabbed my phone and tried calling Sarah. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again, and again. Same result. No signal. Panic started to set in. I paced around my apartment like a caged animal, my mind racing with all sorts of terrifying scenarios. Was she injured? Lost? Had she encountered someone or something out there in the woods? I tried to tell myself to calm down, that there was probably a perfectly reasonable explanation for her lack of communication. Maybe her phone battery died. Maybe she was in a spot with no reception. Maybe she just wanted to disconnect for a while and enjoy nature. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Really wrong. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face, her smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. I imagined her out there in the darkness, alone and scared. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and wait. Tuesday morning, I woke up with a new resolve. Screw work. Screw everything. I was going to find Sarah. I threw some clothes on, grabbed my keys, and headed out the door. The drive to the Black Hills was a blur. I barely remember any of it. All I could think about was getting to Sarah, making sure she was okay. When I finally reached the trailhead, it was like stepping into another world. The air was still and heavy, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the chirping of birds. It was beautiful, in a way, but also unsettling. Like something was watching me from the shadows. I found Sarah's car still parked in the lot, exactly where she'd left it. My heart sank. If she'd come back, she would have driven home, right? I took a deep breath and started down the trail. The path was narrow and winding, the trees forming a dense canopy overhead. The sunlight filtered through the leaves and patches, creating an eerie, dappled effect on the forest floor. I walked for what felt like hours, my anxiety growing with every step. I kept imagining Sarah's face, her voice, the way she always squeezed my hand when she was scared. Then, I saw it. A flash of color in the distance. It was Sarah's backpack, lying abandoned on the side of the trail. My heart pounded in my chest as I ran towards it. I knelt down and picked it up, my hands trembling. It was her backpack, no doubt about it. But where was she? I unzipped the main compartment and rummaged through the contents. Her water bottle, her first aid kit, her compass, everything was there. Except her phone. Then I saw it, tucked into a side pocket. Her phone. I pulled it out and quickly pressed the power button. The screen lit up, displaying a single, unfinished text message. Don't. Don't what? Don't go any further? Don't trust anyone? Don't look behind you? A wave of fear washed over me. Something was terribly wrong. I scrolled through her recent messages, hoping to find some clue, some indication of what had happened. And that's when I saw it. A photo she'd sent earlier that day. It was a selfie of Sarah, standing in front of a massive, ancient tree. She looked different. Her eyes were wide and hollow, her smile strained. And in the background, behind her, I could just make out a set of footprints. But they weren't human footprints. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold Sarah's phone. I stared at that photo, zooming in on those footprints, trying to make sense of it all. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, long and narrow, with what looked like 3 toes. They looked almost reptilian. A shiver ran down my spine. What the hell had Sarah stumbled upon out here? I had to find her. I had to know she was okay. I shoved the phone into my pocket and continued down the trail, my pace quickening. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees looming like silent giants. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Every sound, the snapping of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a bird, made me jump. I don't know how long I walked. It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that dense, oppressive forest. Finally, the trail opened up into a small clearing. In the center, a campfire smoldered, the embers glowing faintly in the fading light. A few logs were arranged around the fire pit, as if someone had been sitting there recently. I approached cautiously, scanning the area for any sign of Sarah. But there was nothing. Just the empty clearing, the dying fire, and an unsettling silence that hung heavy in the air. Then, I saw it. A splash of crimson on the forest floor. Blood. My heart pounded in my chest as I knelt down for a closer look. It was definitely blood, still fresh, still sticky. There were several drops scattered across the ground, leading off into the trees. I followed the trail of blood, my fear growing with every step. The trees seemed to press in on me, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. I felt like I was being watched. Like something was following me, just out of sight. The trail of blood led me deeper into the woods, away from the clearing and the dying fire. The trees grew thicker, the undergrowth denser, the air heavy with the smell of decay. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and writhed around me. I felt a growing sense of dread, a primal fear that gnawed at my insides. I was alone in this vast, ancient forest, following a trail of blood that led to God knows where. Was this how Sarah felt? Lost, scared, hunted? I pushed aside a low-hanging branch and stumbled into another small clearing. And that's when I saw it. A small, crudely built shelter, fashioned from branches and leaves. It looked like something a child might build in their backyard, not something you'd find deep in the wilderness. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. Was this where Sarah had been staying? Was she inside? I peered inside the shelter, but it was too dark to see anything. I reached into my pocket for my phone, fumbling for the flashlight app. The light flickered on, illuminating the interior of the shelter. It was empty, but there were signs that someone had been living there. A sleeping bag lay crumpled in the corner. A few empty food wrappers were scattered on the ground. And in the center of the shelter, a small pile of something lay heaped on the dirt floor. I knelt down for a closer look, my stomach churning. It was a pile of bones. Small, delicate bones. Animal bones. But they weren't just scattered randomly. They were arranged in a pattern. A spiral. A spiral that seemed to writhe and pulse in the flickering light of my phone. I recoiled in horror, my mind reeling. What the hell was going on here? What kind of sick game was being played? And then I heard it. A sound from the depths of the forest. A low, guttural growl, like something out of a nightmare. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Something was out there. Something was watching me. That growl sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I spun around, my phone's flashlight beam dancing wildly in the darkness, trying to find the source of the sound. But I couldn't see anything. Just trees, shadows, and the oppressive darkness. The growling came again, closer this time. It was a deep, guttural sound, full of menace and hunger. It sounded like some kind of animal. But not any animal I'd ever heard before. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of there. I had to find Sarah. But my legs felt like lead, my body frozen in fear. Then I saw it. A pair of eyes, glowing in the darkness. They were yellow, like a cat's eyes, but much larger, much more intense. They were watching me, tracking my every move. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root and falling to the ground. My phone slipped from my grasp, the flashlight beam skittering across the forest floor. I scrambled to retrieve it, my hands shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The growling grew louder, closer. I could feel the creature's presence, its hot, fetid breath on my neck. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the attack. But it never came. I opened my eyes cautiously, my heart still pounding. The eyes were gone. The growling had faded into the distance. I scrambled to my feet, my legs trembling. I had to get out of there. Now! I ran blindly through the forest, the branches whipping in my face, the undergrowth tearing at my clothes. I didn't care. All I cared about was escaping that creature, that thing that was stalking me. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, until my lungs burned and my legs ached. Finally, I collapsed on the forest floor, gasping for breath. I lay there for a long time, listening to the sounds of the forest. The wind rustling through the leaves. The distant hoot of an owl. The chirping of crickets. But there was no growling. No eyes. No creature. I was alone. Or was I? I slowly got to my feet, my body aching, my mind reeling. I had no idea where I was, how far I'd run, or even which direction I should go to get back to the trail. Panic threatened to overwhelm me again, but I forced it down. Freaking out wouldn't help. I needed to think clearly. Taking a deep breath, I tried to get my bearings. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting long, ominous shadows through the trees. The air was growing colder, and a light mist was starting to rise from the forest floor. It was getting dark. I had to find shelter. and I had to find Sarah. I started walking, choosing a direction at random, hoping it would lead me back to the trail. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees an endless maze of trunks and branches. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, sent a shiver down my spine. I walked for what felt like hours, but I didn't see any sign of the trail. The sun had almost disappeared below the horizon, and the forest was growing darker by the minute. I was losing hope. Then, I saw it. A faint glow in the distance, like a campfire. Could it be? Could it be Sarah? I hurried towards the light, my heart pounding with renewed hope. As I got closer, I could see that it was indeed a campfire, burning brightly in a small clearing. And there, sitting beside the fire, was a figure. It was Sarah. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. I ran towards her, calling her name. Sarah. Sarah, it's me. She turned towards me, her face illuminated by the firelight. But it wasn't the Sarah I knew. Her eyes were wide and vacant, her expression blank. She looked different. And then I saw it. Standing behind her, its hand resting on her shoulder, was the creature. The creature with the glowing yellow eyes. It was tall and gaunt, its skin a sickly pale green. Its limbs were long and spindly, its fingers tipped with sharp, black claws. Its face was a grotesque mask of bone and the creature's growl echoed through the clearing, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream. Terror had paralyzed me completely. Sarah, or whatever she was now, just sat there, staring blankly into the fire. She didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't even seem to see me. It was like she was empty. A shell. The creature took a step towards me, its claws scraping against the ground. Its eyes burned into me, filled with a cold, malevolent intelligence. I knew in that moment that I was no match for it. I was going to die. But then, something unexpected happened. Sarah, or the thing that wore Sarah's skin, turned her head and looked at me. And for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. A spark of the Sarah I knew and loved. She opened her mouth, as if to speak. But before she could utter a word, the creature's hand clamped down on her shoulder, silencing her. It glared at me, its eyes filled with rage. And then, it lunged. I screamed and threw myself to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws. I scrambled to my feet and ran, the creature's growls echoing behind me. I didn't look back, didn't dare to. I just ran, blindly, desperately, hoping to escape the nightmare. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like an eternity. But eventually, I stumbled out of the forest and onto the trail. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling with fear and exhaustion. I lay there for a long time, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had happened. But it was no use. It was all too much. Too unreal. Too terrifying. I eventually managed to get to my feet and stumble back to my car. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember much of it. All I could think about was Sarah, and the creature, and the horrifying events of the past few days. I haven't been back to the Black Hills since. I can't. The memories are too painful, too real. I still have nightmares about that creature. I still see its eyes glowing in the darkness. I still hear its growls echoing in my ears. And I still wonder what happened to Sarah. Is she still out there, somewhere in that dark and ancient forest? Or is she gone forever, lost to the creature that stole her away? I don't know. And I don't think I ever will. The crisp mountain air whipped through my hair as I surveyed the breathtaking vista from my ranger station. Towering pines stood sentinel against the vibrant hues of a setting sun, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Mount Rainier, a majestic giant cloaked in snow and ice, dominated the horizon, its peak piercing the clouds like a celestial spear. I've always felt a profound connection to this place, a deep sense of belonging amidst the untamed wilderness. As a park ranger at Mount Rainier National Park, I've spent countless hours exploring its hidden trails, marveling at its diverse wildlife, and assisting visitors in their quest to experience the park's raw beauty. Today was like any other, a steady stream of hikers and nature enthusiasts seeking adventure and solace in the park's embrace. I answered questions, provided directions, and shared my knowledge of the local flora and fauna. But beneath the surface of this tranquil routine, a growing unease gnawed at me. Over the past few months, a string of missing person cases has cast a pall over the park. Hikers venturing into the wilderness have vanished without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a lingering sense of dread. The park officials have assured the public that these incidents are isolated and unrelated, but I can't shake the feeling that something more sinister is at play. The disappearances are eerily similar, each hiker vanishing without a trace, their last known whereabouts deep within the park's labyrinthine trails. Search parties have come up empty, finding no signs of foul play or any indication of what might have befallen these unfortunate souls. As I prepare to lock up the ranger station for the night, a shiver runs down my spine. The wind howls through the trees, carrying with it a whisper of something unknown, something unsettling. I can't help but feel that I'm being watched, that unseen eyes are following my every move. There's a darkness lurking in the heart of this pristine wilderness, a malevolent presence that I can't ignore. I'm determined to uncover the truth behind these disappearances, to shed light on the shadows that have fallen upon Mount Rainier. The case that truly shook me to the core involved a young woman named Emily. She was an avid hiker, a seasoned adventurer who knew these trails like the back of her hand. One crisp autumn morning, she set off on a solo trek, eager to immerse herself in the park's splendor. She never returned. Search and rescue teams combed the area for days, but Emily vanished without a trace. Her disappearance weighed heavily on me, a constant reminder of the lurking darkness that seemed to be consuming the park. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's case was connected to the others, that there was a pattern hidden in the chaos. My patrols became more vigilant, my senses heightened, always scanning the surroundings for any sign of disturbance. An eerie feeling clung to me like a shroud, the sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes following my every move. The once familiar trails now seemed ominous, the rustling leaves and creaking branches whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. strange occurrences became more frequent. Fleeting shadows danced at the edge of my vision, disappearing when I turned to face them. The wildlife seemed agitated, their calls filled with an unusual urgency. I even stumbled upon a patch of ground where the vegetation was inexplicably withered and blackened, as if scorched by an unseen fire. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, I ventured off the beaten path, drawn by an inexplicable pull. Deep in the woods, far from any marked trail, I stumbled upon a sight that sent chills down my spine. A backpack lay abandoned beneath a towering fir tree, its contents spilled across the forest floor. My heart pounded in my chest as I recognized the embroidered initials on the backpack. It belonged to Emily. The backpack lay nestled amidst the undergrowth, its once vibrant colors dulled by the damp forest floor. A gaping tear marred its side, and its contents were strewn about, a testament to a desperate struggle. Emily's belongings, once cherished possessions, now lay scattered and forgotten, a poignant reminder of her tragic fate. A wave of nausea washed over me as I knelt beside the backpack, my fingers tracing the tattered fabric. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Emily had met a gruesome end, and I was standing amidst the remnants of her final moments. The park, once a sanctuary, now felt like a haunting ground, its beauty tainted by the lurking evil. The conviction grew within me that something sinister was responsible for Emily's disappearance and the others. It wasn't just a series of unfortunate accidents. There was a deliberate hand at play, a malevolent force orchestrating these tragedies. I had to bring this to the attention of my superiors, to warn them of the danger lurking within the park's boundaries. With a heavy heart, I returned to the ranger station, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. I recounted my findings to the head ranger, detailing the location of the backpack and my growing suspicions. But my concerns were met with indifference, dismissed as the ramblings of an overactive imagination. "There's no evidence of foul play," the head ranger said dismissively, his eyes fixed on the paperwork before him. "These are just unfortunate accidents, a sad reality of the wilderness. You're letting your emotions get the better of you." Frustration gnawed at me, the feeling of helplessness amplified by the dismissive attitude of my superiors. They were blinded by their adherence to protocol, their unwillingness to acknowledge the possibility of something more sinister at play. But I wouldn't be deterred. I owed it to Emily, to all the missing hikers, to uncover the truth. Despite the warnings and the lack of support, I resolved to continue my investigation. I would delve deeper into the park's secrets, follow the trail of disappearances, and expose the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of this pristine wilderness. The ranger station's flickering fluorescent lights seemed to mock my determination as I delved into the park's archives. Dust motes danced in the pale light, illuminating stacks of forgotten files and faded photographs. The musty scent of old paper filled the air, a testament to the countless stories and secrets hidden within these walls. I immersed myself in the park's history, poring over records of past disappearances, searching for any patterns or connections that might have been overlooked. The official reports were frustratingly vague, attributing the vanishings to disorientation, wild animal attacks, or simple misadventure. But my gut screamed that there was more to these stories, a hidden truth buried beneath the surface. As I dug deeper, I stumbled upon a collection of local legends and myths, tales passed down through generations of indigenous people and early settlers. These stories spoke of mysterious creatures inhabiting the mountain's depths, shadowy beings that preyed on unsuspecting travelers. There were whispers of ancient rituals and sacrifices, of a dark power that demanded appeasement. One recurring theme caught my attention, a creature of immense power, dwelling in the heart of the mountain, known as the Shadow Walker. Legend had it that the Shadow Walker roamed the wilderness, cloaked in darkness, its presence heralded by an unnatural chill and a sense of overwhelming dread. It was said to lure hikers off the trails, their cries echoing through the valleys before fading into an eerie silence. The folklore resonated with me, its chilling tales mirroring the recent disappearances. Could there be a connection between these ancient legends and the current events plaguing the park? Was the Shadow Walker more than just a myth, a terrifying reality lurking in the shadows? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but also ignited a spark of determination within me. I would venture into the park's uncharted territories, the areas where most of the disappearances occurred. I would seek out the truth, armed with my knowledge and a growing sense of foreboding. The Shadow Walker, if it existed, would be exposed, its reign of terror brought to an end. Dawn painted the sky with hues of gray and purple as I prepared for my foray into the unknown. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a steely resolve. I had to find answers, for Emily, for the missing hikers, and for my own sanity. I meticulously packed my backpack with essentials: a compass, a map, a first aid kit, extra layers of clothing, high-energy snacks, and a powerful flashlight. My trusty multi-tool hung from my belt, a reassuring weight against my hip. A tremor of fear ran through me, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. With a deep breath, I stepped into the wilderness, leaving behind the familiar trails and venturing into the uncharted depths of the park. The air grew heavy with an unnatural silence, the usual symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves replaced by an eerie stillness. A sense of isolation washed over me, amplified by the towering trees that seemed to close in from all sides. The terrain grew treacherous, the path riddled with hidden roots and loose rocks. The vegetation took on an otherworldly quality, the trees gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Strange symbols, etched into the bark of ancient trees, caught my eye, their cryptic messages sending shivers down my spine. As I pressed deeper into the wilderness, a sense of unease settled over me. The air grew thick with an unseen presence, a feeling of being watched, of being followed. I scanned the surroundings, my senses on high alert, but found nothing but the dense foliage and the oppressive silence. Then, I stumbled upon it, a hidden cave, nestled amidst a cluster of moss-covered rocks. An unnatural chill emanated from its depths, and the air crackled with an eerie energy. The entrance was shrouded in shadow, beckoning me closer, promising answers to the questions that haunted me. With a mixture of trepidation and determination, I approached the cave, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The strange symbols I had seen earlier adorned the cave walls, their intricate patterns hinting at a hidden meaning. A sense of dread washed over me, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to know what secrets lay hidden within the belly of the mountain. My flashlight beam danced across the uneven walls of the cave, revealing a damp, earthen chamber. A musty odor hung in the air, a mix of decaying leaves and something ancient, something indescribably primal. The strange symbols I'd seen outside were etched deeper into the cave walls here, forming intricate patterns that seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering light. A sense of foreboding pressed down on me, heavier with each step I took. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the drip of water echoing through the cavern. The air grew colder, seeping into my bones, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. As I ventured deeper, the cave opened into a larger chamber, the ceiling disappearing into a black abyss. My flashlight beam struggled to penetrate the darkness, but I could make out piles of debris scattered across the floor. A closer look revealed remnants of camping gear, a tattered tent, a rusty lantern, a half-buried backpack. My heart pounded in my chest as I recognized the faded logo on the backpack. It was the same brand that Emily carried. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to continue. This was more than just a cave. It was a graveyard of lost souls. Amongst the debris, I found more personal effects, a worn hiking boot, a tarnished locket, a child's stuffed toy. Then, something glinted in the dirt. I knelt down, brushing away the earth to reveal a human bone, bleached white and eerily smooth. More bones lay scattered nearby, a grim testament to the cave's dark secrets. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This cave was connected to the missing hikers, a place where their trails ended, their lives extinguished. The legends, the Shadow Walker, it all felt terrifyingly real. A low growl echoed from the depths of the cave, sending a surge of adrenaline through me. I whipped around, my flashlight beam frantically searching the darkness. 2 points of eerie light glowed from the shadows, piercing the blackness like a predator's eyes. A monstrous shape began to emerge from the darkness, its form shifting and distorted in the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed to bend at unnatural angles. Its skin was pale and stretched taut over its bones, and its eyes burned with an unholy light. The creature let out another growl, a sound that reverberated through the cavern, chilling me to the core. I knew then that I had stumbled upon the heart of the mountain's darkness, the source of the disappearances, the terrifying reality behind the legend of the Shadow Walker. The creature emerged from the shadows, its form solidifying into a grotesque mockery of a human. Its limbs were elongated and skeletal, ending in sharp claws that scraped against the cave floor. Its skin was a sickly pale, stretched taut over its bones, revealing the intricate network of veins beneath. Its face was gaunt and angular, with deep-set eyes that burned with an unholy light. A guttural growl rumbled from its throat, echoing through the cavern. The sound sent shivers down my spine, and I instinctively took a step back. The creature's eyes followed my every move, their intensity boring into me. Panic surged through me, but I knew I couldn't give in to fear. I had to escape, to warn others about the horrors lurking within the mountain. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and fled, my flashlight beam dancing wildly across the cave walls. The creature's growls echoed behind me, growing louder with each passing moment. I could hear its heavy footsteps pounding on the cave floor, gaining on me. My heart hammered in my chest, and my lungs burned with exertion. I stumbled over rocks and debris, my flashlight slipping from my grasp. The cave plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the creature's glowing eyes, which were closing in on me. Just as I thought I was trapped, I spotted a narrow opening in the cave wall. With a desperate lunge, I squeezed through the opening, scrambling out into the cool night air. I didn't stop running, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest seemed to blur around me, the trees a dizzying array of shadows. The creature's growls still echoed in my ears, fueling my flight. As I stumbled through the undergrowth, I tripped over a root, falling to the ground with a thud. I lay there for a moment, catching my breath, my body trembling with fear and exhaustion. Then, I noticed something strange. The ground beneath me was marked with a series of symbols, etched into the dirt. They were the same symbols I had seen in the cave, the same symbols that adorned the creature's skin. I followed the trail of symbols, my curiosity overcoming my fear. The trail led me deeper into the wilderness, away from the familiar paths. I had a growing sense that I was being led somewhere, that the creature was drawing me further into its domain. The trail ended abruptly at a clearing, where a towering stone monolith stood bathed in moonlight. The same symbols were carved into its surface, their intricate patterns glowing with an eerie light. I felt a presence behind me, and I turned to see the creature standing at the edge of the clearing. Its eyes burned with an unholy light, and its clawed hands reached out towards me. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The creature, the symbols, the monolith, they were all connected, part of a dark and ancient power that I had unwittingly awakened. Driven by a primal instinct to survive, I fled. The creature's guttural cries echoed through the trees, a terrifying soundtrack to my desperate flight. I scrambled through the undergrowth, branches whipping at my face, my lungs burning with exertion. The forest floor seemed to tilt and sway beneath my feet, the world a dizzying blur of shadows and moonlight. The trail led me deeper into the mountain's embrace, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous. The air grew thin and cold, the silence broken only by the pounding of my own heart. The vegetation thinned, replaced by jagged rocks and scree slopes. I felt a sense of unreality, as if I had stepped into a forgotten realm, a place untouched by human presence. Strange, twisted trees dotted the landscape, their branches gnarled and skeletal. The ground was littered with bones, bleached white by the elements. The air hummed with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of ancient power. I felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that I was venturing deeper into the creature's domain. The trail led me to a narrow pass, the path winding between towering cliffs. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows, transforming the familiar landscape into a nightmarish vision. As I rounded a bend, I gasped in astonishment. Before me lay a hidden valley, bathed in an ethereal glow. A waterfall cascaded down a sheer cliff face, its waters crashing into a crystal-clear pool below. Strange, luminescent plants grew in abundance, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly light. In the center of the valley stood a cluster of ancient stone structures, their walls adorned with the same symbols I had seen in the cave and on the monolith. I cautiously approached the structures, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The buildings were weathered and crumbling, their roofs long since collapsed. The symbols on the walls were faded but still discernible, their intricate patterns hinting at a long-forgotten language. As I explored the ruins, I realized I had stumbled upon an ancient settlement, a place lost to time. A sense of awe mixed with trepidation washed over me. Who were these people who had lived here, in this remote and hidden valley? What was their connection to the creature, to the symbols, to the mountain itself? I found remnants of their lives scattered amongst the ruins, pottery shards, tools fashioned from bone and stone, fragments of woven cloth. The settlement was eerily silent, devoid of any signs of life. It was as if its inhabitants had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only ghosts and whispers of a forgotten past. As I delved deeper into the ruins, I discovered a hidden chamber beneath one of the structures. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with intricate carvings. In the center stood a stone altar, stained with what appeared to be dried blood. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was not just a settlement, it was a place of worship, a place of sacrifice. The creature, the symbols, the monolith, they were all connected to some dark and ancient ritual. I felt a cold presence behind me, and I turned to see the creature standing in the entrance to the chamber. Its eyes burned with an unholy light, and its clawed hands twitched with anticipation. I knew then that I had stumbled upon the heart of the mountain's secrets, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The creature was not just a predator, it was a guardian, a protector of this ancient and unholy power. And I was an intruder, a trespasser in its domain. The chamber reeked of decay and something ancient, something foul. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of blood and burnt offerings. Torches flickered in niches along the walls, casting an eerie glow on the grotesque carvings that adorned every surface. The symbols I'd seen throughout my journey were etched here with disturbing detail, intertwined with depictions of monstrous figures and scenes of ritual sacrifice. The creature stepped into the chamber, its eyes burning with an unholy light. It moved with an unnatural grace, its clawed feet silent on the stone floor. It gestured towards the altar, its meaning clear. This was a place of worship, and I was the intended sacrifice. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had to find a way out, to escape this nightmare. I scanned the chamber, searching for an exit, a weapon, anything that could aid me in my fight for survival. My gaze fell upon a pile of bones in the corner, the remnants of past victims. Among them, I spotted a long, sharpened bone, likely used in some gruesome ritual. I lunged for it, grasping the bone in my hand. It felt cold and smooth, a stark contrast to the warmth of my own flesh. The creature lunged, its claws outstretched. I raised the bone in defense, bracing myself for the impact. The creature's claws raked across my arm, tearing through my jacket and drawing blood. I cried out in pain, but I didn't let go of the bone. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I thrust the bone towards the creature, striking it in the chest. The creature recoiled, a guttural hiss escaping its lips. I pressed my attack, striking again and again, driving the creature back. The creature's movements became sluggish, its attacks less ferocious. It stumbled backwards, its eyes flickering with confusion and pain. I seized the opportunity, scrambling past the creature and towards the chamber entrance. I burst out of the chamber, the creature's enraged roars echoing behind me. I didn't look back, my only thought was escape. I fled through the ruins, my heart pounding, my lungs burning. As I ran, I heard the chanting of voices, growing louder with each passing moment. I emerged from the ruins into the valley, where a group of figures stood gathered around a bonfire. They were cloaked in dark robes, their faces obscured by hoods. They turned towards me, their eyes glowing in the firelight. I recognized the symbols emblazoned on their robes, the same symbols I had seen throughout my journey. These were the cultists, the worshippers of the creature, the orchestrators of the disappearances. They raised their hands towards me, chanting in a language I didn't understand. The creature emerged from the ruins, its eyes fixed on me with a predatory hunger. I was trapped, surrounded by enemies, with nowhere to run. I knew then that I had stumbled upon a secret far greater than I could have ever imagined. The creature, the cultists, the mountain, they were all connected, part of a dark and ancient power that I had unwittingly awakened. And I was about to become its latest victim. The cultists surged forward, their chanting reaching a fever pitch. The creature stalked towards me, its eyes burning with predatory hunger. I raised the bone, my knuckles white, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I knew I couldn't fight them all, but I would go down swinging. Just as the cultists were upon me, a blinding light erupted from the monolith. The ground shook beneath my feet, and a deafening roar echoed through the valley. The cultists stumbled back, their chanting faltering. The creature let out a shriek of rage, its eyes wide with fear. The monolith pulsed with light, the symbols on its surface glowing with an otherworldly intensity. A wave of energy emanated from the monolith, washing over the valley. I felt a surge of power coursing through me, my fear replaced by a strange sense of calm. The cultists screamed in terror as the energy engulfed them. Their bodies contorted, their flesh melting away, their bones turning to dust. The creature thrashed and writhed, its form flickering in and out of existence. Then, with a final agonizing shriek, it vanished into thin air. The light subsided, leaving the valley in an eerie silence. The cultists were gone, their robes and belongings scattered across the ground. The creature was gone, its presence erased from the mountain. The monolith stood silent, its symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. I stood there, trembling, my mind reeling from the events of the night. I had witnessed the power of the mountain, the ancient force that had protected this valley for centuries. And I had survived. I stumbled back to the ranger station, my clothes torn, my body battered and bruised. I told my superiors about the creature, the cultists, the valley. They listened with skepticism, their faces etched with disbelief. But I knew what I had seen, what I had experienced. The mountain held secrets, dark and ancient secrets, and I had stumbled upon them. I resigned from my job, unable to bear the weight of my knowledge. I left Mount Rainier behind, but the memories of that night haunted me. I knew the creature was gone, but the cultists, they were still out there, somewhere. I often wonder if they will return, if they will seek to awaken the creature once more. And I wonder if I will be ready for them. The mountain still calls to me, its secrets beckoning. I know I should stay away, but the curiosity, the need to understand, is too strong. I fear I will return one day, drawn back to the place where I faced the darkness. And I fear what I might find there. The crisp mountain air whipped through my hair as I drove the familiar route to the ranger station. Dawn was just breaking, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Another day, another patrol through the vast wilderness of Yosemite National Park. My name's Alex, and I've been a park ranger for the past 7 years. I've always loved the solitude of the wilderness, the feeling of being surrounded by nature's raw beauty. But lately, that sense of peace has been replaced by a gnawing unease. It started with the disappearance of a hiker, a young man named David Miller, who vanished without a trace a week ago. We organized search parties, combed through miles of trails, and even brought in search dogs, but there was no sign of him. The only thing we found was his abandoned campsite, his tent flapping in the wind, his belongings scattered around as if he'd left in a hurry. The feeling of dread intensified with each passing day. David's disappearance weighed heavily on me, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the park's serene facade. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something sinister had happened, something that went beyond a simple case of a lost hiker. The radio crackled to life, interrupting my thoughts. Dispatch was calling, their voice a calm contrast to the growing anxiety in my gut. Ranger Alex, we've received a possible lead on the missing hiker case. A group of campers reported finding a backpack near Eagle Creek. Could you head over and investigate? My pulse quickened. Could this be a break in the case? I acknowledged the call and steered my truck towards Eagle Creek, a remote area in the northern part of the park. The dirt road was rough and uneven, and the dense forest canopy cast long shadows, deepening the sense of isolation. As I approached the location, I noticed a group of campers huddled together, their faces etched with worry. They pointed towards a clearing where a faded blue backpack lay abandoned amidst the tall grass. I approached cautiously, my senses on high alert. The backpack was worn and dusty, a tattered trail map sticking out from one of the side pockets. I recognized it instantly as David's. My heart sank. Finding his backpack only fueled a growing sense of dread. Where was David? Had he simply wandered off, or was there something more sinister at play? I knelt down and carefully examined the backpack. It was empty, except for a few energy bar wrappers and a crumpled water bottle. But something caught my eye, a small, leather-bound journal tucked into a hidden compartment. I opened the journal, my fingers trembling slightly. The pages were filled with David's neat handwriting, documenting his journey through the park. The entries were filled with excitement and wonder, capturing the awe of a young man exploring the wilderness for the first time. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone of the entries changed. The excitement gave way to anxiety, then fear. The last entry, scrawled in hurried handwriting, sent a chill down my spine. Something is following me. I can hear it moving through the trees, always just out of sight. I don't know what it is, but it's not human. I'm scared. The words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. I closed the journal, a cold knot forming in my stomach. David's words confirmed my worst fears. Something was out there, something dark and dangerous. And now, it seemed, it was my turn to face it. A wave of nausea washed over me as I read David's final entry, his fear palpable in the frantic scribbles. I closed the journal, the leather cold against my fingertips. The campers watched me with anxious eyes, their whispers a low hum in the stillness of the forest. "Did you find anything?" a young woman asked, her voice trembling. I looked at them, my face grim. "It's his journal," I said, holding it up. He wrote about something following him." A collective gasp arose from the group. Fear was contagious, spreading through them like wildfire. I could see it in their eyes, the same fear that had haunted David, the same fear that was now creeping into my own heart. I reassured the campers that we would continue the search, that we wouldn't rest until we found David. But the words felt hollow even to my own ears. Deep down, I knew that something terrible had happened, something that defied rational explanation. After securing the backpack and calming the campers, I radioed dispatch to report my findings. They instructed me to continue searching the area, to look for any signs of David's whereabouts. But as I ventured deeper into the dense undergrowth, a sense of unease settled over me. The forest seemed to close in, the towering trees casting long shadows that danced and writhed in the fading light. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only sounds were the rustling of branches and the occasional cry of a distant bird. I followed a narrow trail that snaked through the undergrowth, my eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of David. But there was nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign of a struggle. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As the sun began to set, casting the forest in an eerie twilight, I stumbled upon a small clearing. And there, in the center of the clearing, I saw it. A figure, hunched over on the ground. My heart pounded in my chest. Could it be David? I rushed towards the figure, my hope battling with a growing sense of dread. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't David. It was something else. Something that made my blood run cold. The figure was hunched over a mangled carcass, its back to me. I couldn't make out what kind of animal it was, but it was clear that it had been brutally killed. The flesh was torn and shredded, the bones exposed, and the ground was stained with blood. The figure turned its head, and I caught a glimpse of its face. It was pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural light. Its mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The creature looked up at me, its eyes locking onto mine. And in that moment, I knew that I was looking into the face of something truly evil. Panic seized me. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a gnarled tree root. I fell to the ground, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Scrambling back, I frantically searched for my radio, my fingers fumbling with the buttons. Dispatch, dispatch, this is Ranger Alex. I need backup at. My voice faltered. I couldn't remember the grid coordinates. My mind was a chaotic mess of fear and adrenaline. The creature rose from its gruesome feast, its movements fluid and unnervingly silent. It took a step towards me, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. I could see the blood staining its ragged clothes, the matted hair clinging to its skeletal frame. It was like something out of a nightmare, a creature that defied all logic and reason. I scrambled back, my hands searching for something, anything, to defend myself. I found a rock, small and jagged, and gripped it tightly. It was a pathetic weapon against such a monstrous creature, but it was all I had. The creature continued its advance, its movements deliberate and predatory. It was toying with me, savoring my fear. I could smell its fetid breath, a mixture of decay and something indescribably foul. I hurled the rock at the creature, but it missed, sailing harmlessly past its head. The creature let out a low growl, a sound that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. I knew I was no match for it. I was trapped, cornered like a helpless animal. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the attack never came. I opened my eyes cautiously. The creature was gone, vanished without a trace. I lay there for a moment, my body trembling, my mind reeling. What had I just seen? Was it real, or was I losing my mind? I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaky. I had to get out of there, to report this thing. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something on the ground. A small, leather-bound journal. David's journal. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the worn leather. I opened it to the last page, the page with David's final entry. But the words were different. They were no longer a plea for help, a desperate cry for salvation. They were a warning. "Don't follow me," the entry read. "It's not what you think. It's not human. And it's hungry." The words seemed to burn into my brain, their chilling message echoing in the silence of the forest. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Something that lurked in the shadows, something that preyed on the lost and the vulnerable. And it was watching me. I staggered back to my truck, David's journal clutched tightly in my hand. The setting sun cast long, eerie shadows across the forest floor, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of unease that chilled me to the bone. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I managed to unlock the truck and climb inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned back against the seat, my chest heaving, my mind racing. What had I just witnessed? What kind of creature was that? And what had happened to David? I opened his journal again, hoping to find some answers, some clue to his fate. But the pages only offered more questions. David's entries grew increasingly frantic, filled with paranoia and fear. He wrote about being followed, about seeing shadows lurking at the edge of his vision, about hearing whispers in the dead of night. He described the creature in terrifying detail, its gaunt frame, its hollow eyes, its grotesque grin. He wrote about its unnatural strength, its ability to move silently through the forest, its insatiable hunger. The final entry was a desperate plea for help, a chilling premonition of his doom. "It's found me," he wrote. "I can't escape. It's going to." The sentence ended abruptly, the last few words scrawled in a frantic, almost illegible hand. I closed the journal, my heart heavy with dread. David was gone. Taken by something evil, something that lurked in the shadows of the forest, something that preyed on the innocent. I looked out the window, my gaze sweeping across the darkening landscape. The forest seemed to hold its breath, its silence heavy with secrets. I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. I knew then that I wasn't just dealing with a missing hiker case. I was facing something far more sinister, something that threatened not only my sanity but my very life. I started the truck and pulled away, leaving the clearing behind. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that the creature was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. I had to warn the others. I had to tell them about the creature, about the danger that lurked in the heart of the park. But who would believe me? Who would listen to the ravings of a park ranger who had stumbled upon something too terrifying to comprehend? I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. I was alone in this fight, a lone man against an unseen enemy. But I wouldn't give up. I would find a way to stop the creature, to avenge David's death, to protect the innocent. I had to. It was my duty. The drive back to the ranger station was a blur. My mind was a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and a growing sense of responsibility. I had to tell someone about what I'd seen, about the creature lurking in the woods. But who would believe me? I imagined their reactions, the skeptical looks, the thinly veiled amusement. Ranger Alex has finally cracked, they'd whisper behind my back. Too much time alone in the wilderness. But I couldn't stay silent. David's fate weighed heavily on me. He deserved justice, and the other hikers deserved to be warned. When I arrived at the station, the atmosphere was tense. The search for David had been scaled back, but the mood was somber. I found Ranger Mike, a seasoned veteran with a weathered face and a no-nonsense attitude. He was the closest thing I had to a friend in the park. "Mike, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice urgent. I found something disturbing. He looked at me, his brow furrowed. "What is it, Alex? Another dead end?" I hesitated, unsure how to begin. "It's not a dead end," I said, my voice low. It's something else entirely." I led him to my office and closed the door behind us. I took a deep breath and recounted the events of the day, the discovery of David's journal, the encounter with the creature, the chilling warning in the final entry. Mike listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grave. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Alex," he said finally, his voice heavy, "what you're describing, it's impossible. There's no such creature." "But I saw it, Mike," I insisted. "I saw it with my own eyes." He sighed. "I know you believe what you saw, Alex. But sometimes, when we're under stress, our minds can play tricks on us. We see things that aren't there." "But the journal, Mike," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "David saw it too. He described it in detail." Mike took the journal from my hands and flipped through the pages. He read David's entries, his face pale and drawn. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "I don't know what to say, Alex," he said, his voice barely a whisper. This changes everything." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "We need to tell the others," he said. "We need to warn them." I nodded, a surge of relief washing over me. Finally, someone believed me. Finally, I wasn't alone in this fight. But as we prepared to alert the rest of the rangers, a chilling thought struck me. What if it was too late? What if the creature had already found its next victim? We gathered the rangers in the briefing room, the air thick with apprehension. Mike took the lead, explaining the situation with a gravity that silenced any lingering doubts. He laid out the facts: David's disappearance, the journal entries, my encounter with the creature. He even showed them the journal, the chilling words a testament to the horror we were facing. The initial reaction was a mix of disbelief and fear. Some rangers scoffed, dismissing it as a tall tale, a product of stress and overactive imaginations. Others were visibly shaken, their eyes wide with fear. "This is crazy," one ranger muttered, shaking his head. "There's no such thing as monsters." "Maybe not," Mike countered, his voice firm, "but something's out there. Something that killed David." He outlined a plan. We would increase patrols, warn visitors to stay on the marked trails, and avoid venturing into the deeper parts of the forest. We would also contact the authorities, inform them of the situation, and request assistance. But even as we formulated our plan, a sense of dread hung over the room. We were facing an unknown enemy, something that defied logic and reason. We were ill-equipped to deal with such a threat, our training and experience inadequate against a creature that seemed to exist outside the realm of the natural. As the meeting dispersed, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were already too late. The creature was out there, lurking in the shadows, watching our every move. It was only a matter of time before it struck again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in my bed, my mind haunted by images of David's final moments, of the creature's grotesque form, of its chilling grin. I felt a profound sense of helplessness, a fear that gnawed at my soul. I got out of bed and went to the window. The moon cast an eerie glow over the forest, its silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. I stared out into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, I saw movement in the shadows. A figure, tall and gaunt, emerged from the trees. It was the creature. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The creature stood there for a moment, its eyes fixed on me, its grin widening. Then it turned and vanished back into the darkness. I stumbled back from the window, my heart racing. The creature was here. It had followed me. It was watching me. I knew then that I was no longer safe. The creature had marked me as its next victim. The following days were a torment. The creature's appearance at my window shattered any remaining sense of safety. I felt like prey, constantly watching my back, jumping at every shadow, every creak in the floorboards. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by stress and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew the truth. The creature was real, and it was toying with me, slowly tightening its grip on my sanity. One night, I was driving home from a late shift at the station. The road was deserted, the only sound the hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road ahead. As I rounded a bend, my headlights fell upon a figure standing in the middle of the road. My heart lurched. It was the creature. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt. The creature stood motionless, bathed in the harsh glare of my headlights. Its eyes, dark and hollow, seemed to bore into my soul. I couldn't breathe. Fear paralyzed me, gripping me in its icy claws. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but face the horror that stood before me. But I couldn't move. I was trapped, a deer caught in the headlights. The creature took a step towards the truck, its movements slow and deliberate. I could hear its ragged breathing, a rasping sound that sent shivers down my spine. I fumbled for my radio, my fingers trembling. Dispatch, dispatch, this is Ranger Alex. I need backup, urgent. My voice faltered. The creature was now right in front of the truck, its face inches from the windshield. Its eyes, filled with malice and hunger, locked onto mine. I screamed, a primal cry of terror that echoed through the empty night. I threw the truck into reverse and slammed my foot on the accelerator. The tires spun, spitting gravel, as I backed away from the creature. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the ranger station. I stumbled out of the truck, my legs shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I burst into the station, my face pale, my eyes wild with fear. The other rangers stared at me, their faces a mixture of concern and confusion. I tried to explain what I had seen, but the words caught in my throat. I could only point towards the road, my voice a strangled whisper. It's out there, it's coming. They followed my gaze, their eyes searching the darkness. But there was nothing there. The creature had vanished. I knew they didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy, hallucinating. But I knew the truth. The creature was out there, and it was coming for me. The encounter on the road pushed me over the edge. The fear, the constant paranoia, the lack of sleep, it was all taking its toll. I was a wreck, haunted by nightmares and visions, my nerves frayed, my mind on the verge of collapse. The other rangers, despite their initial skepticism, couldn't ignore my deteriorating state. They insisted I take some time off, to rest and recover. But how could I rest when I knew the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity? I packed a bag and left the park, seeking refuge in the anonymity of a nearby town. I rented a small cabin, hoping to find some peace, some respite from the horrors that haunted me. But the creature followed me. I saw it everywhere, in the shadows of the trees, in the reflection of the lake, in the faces of strangers. Its presence was a constant weight on my shoulders, a suffocating reminder of my impending doom. One night, I woke up to a scratching sound at my window. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew who it was. I crept towards the window, my breath held tight. I peered through the blinds, my eyes widening in horror. The creature was standing outside, its face pressed against the glass. Its eyes, dark and hollow, burned into mine. Its grin was wider than ever, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. I stumbled back from the window, my heart racing. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. Hello, police? There's something outside my house. It's not human. My voice cracked. I couldn't explain. How could I describe the creature, the horror, the fear that consumed me? The operator's voice was calm, reassuring. "Sir, please stay calm and tell me your address." I gave her the address, my voice barely a whisper. "Please hurry," I pleaded. "It's trying to get in." I hung up and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. I held it tightly in my hand, my knuckles white. I was ready to fight, to defend myself, to do whatever it took to survive. The scratching at the window grew louder, more insistent. I could hear the creature's ragged breathing, its low growl vibrating through the walls. Suddenly, the window shattered. Glass shards flew across the room, and the creature lunged through the opening. I screamed and charged towards it, the knife raised high. The creature snarled and swiped at me with its claws. I ducked and slashed at its arm, the knife slicing through its flesh. The creature roared in pain and stumbled back. I pressed my attack, slashing and stabbing, driven by a primal fear and a desperate need to survive. The creature fought back, its strength immense, its claws tearing at my flesh. But I was fueled by adrenaline, by a desperate will to live. The cabin was a chaos of snarls, screams, and the clash of metal against bone. I fought with everything I had, my body aching, my vision blurred with blood and sweat. Finally, with a desperate lunge, I plunged the knife deep into the creature's chest. It let out a guttural roar, its body convulsing. Then it collapsed, its lifeless eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, my body trembling. I had done it. I had killed the creature. But as I looked down at its lifeless form, a chilling realization washed over me. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The police arrived, sirens wailing, lights flashing. They found me sitting on the floor of the cabin, amidst the shattered glass and blood stains, the creature's lifeless body sprawled at my feet. They were horrified, their faces pale, their voices hushed. They questioned me, their words a blur, their questions echoing in the silence of the cabin. I tried to explain, to recount the events that led to this gruesome scene, but the words wouldn't come. I could only point at the creature, my voice a hoarse whisper. "It's dead. I killed it." They looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. They saw the blood on my clothes, the wild look in my eyes, the trembling of my hands. They thought I was insane, a danger to myself and others. They took me away, strapped to a stretcher, the sirens wailing a mournful dirge as we sped through the night. I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, my mind deemed unstable, my sanity questioned. I spent weeks in that sterile, white-walled room, surrounded by doctors and nurses who spoke in hushed tones and treated me with a mixture of caution and pity. They diagnosed me with PTSD, with delusions, with a break from reality. They tried to convince me that the creature was a figment of my imagination, a product of stress and trauma. They showed me pictures of bears, of mountain lions, of other wild animals, trying to convince me that I had misidentified a common predator. But I knew the truth. The creature was real. I had seen it, fought it, killed it. And I knew that it wasn't alone. There were others out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next victim. They were the things that nightmares were made of, the creatures that haunted the deepest recesses of our minds. And they were coming for us all. I was released from the hospital eventually, deemed stable enough to return to the world. But I was a changed man. The fear, the paranoia, the knowledge of the creature's existence, it had all left an indelible mark on my soul. I never returned to the park. I couldn't bear the thought of setting foot in that wilderness again, the place where I had encountered the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of reality. I live a quiet life now, a shadow of my former self. I avoid crowds, I stay away from the woods, I keep the lights on at night. I am a prisoner of my own fear, trapped in a world where the monsters are real and the shadows hold unspeakable horrors. And every night, as I lie awake in my bed, listening to the silence of the night, I hear the whispers in the wind, the rustling of leaves, the creaking of the floorboards. And I know that they are coming for me. I've been a park ranger in the Smoky Mountains for about 5 years now. I've always loved being outdoors, and the solitude of the mountains has always been a kind of therapy for me. But lately, things have been off. It started a couple of weeks ago. I was on patrol, hiking one of the less frequented trails, when I came across these weird tracks. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Kinda like a mix between a dog and a bird, but huge. I mean, each print was easily the size of my head. I took a few pictures and sent them to a buddy of mine who's a wildlife biologist. He said he couldn't identify them, which freaked me out a little. I mean, this guy knows his stuff. If he couldn't tell what made those tracks, then what the hell did? Anyway, I tried to put it out of my mind. Figured it was probably just a bear with some weird deformity or something. But then, a few days later, I started hearing things at night. Strange noises coming from the woods. Like a kind of low, guttural growling mixed with this high-pitched screeching. It sent chills down my spine, man. I told myself it was probably just coyotes or something, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was something unnatural about those sounds. Something that made my skin crawl. Then, yesterday, it happened again. I was on patrol, and I found more of those tracks. This time, they were closer to the trail, like whatever made them was getting bolder. And the tracks were fresh, too. Like, really fresh. I felt this cold dread wash over me. I knew something was wrong. Something was out there, watching me. And it wasn't anything I wanted to meet. So, after finding those fresh tracks, I decided to head back to the ranger station. I mean, it was getting late, and I didn't want to be out in the woods after dark with whatever made those prints roaming around. But as I was heading back, I noticed something I'd never seen before. There was this opening in the side of the mountain. Like a small cave hidden behind a thicket of bushes. It looked kinda creepy, but my curiosity got the better of me. I mean, I hiked these trails 100 times, and I'd never seen this cave before. It wasn't on any of the park maps. I figured I should probably check it out, make sure it wasn't some kind of hazard or anything. So, I pulled out my flashlight and cautiously approached the cave. The entrance was narrow and damp, with moss and vines clinging to the rocks. It felt cold, like unnaturally cold. A shiver ran down my spine, and I had this sudden urge to turn back. But something was pulling me towards the cave, like an invisible force. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was thick and heavy, with a musty smell that made my nostrils sting. The beam of my flashlight danced across the rough walls, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. I could hear water dripping somewhere in the depths of the cave, and the sound echoed eerily in the silence. I took another step forward, and then another. The further I went, the colder it got. And the feeling of being watched, it intensified. Like something was lurking just beyond the reach of my flashlight, its eyes fixed on me. I knew I should turn back. This was a bad idea. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to see what was inside. Like it was important somehow. The deeper I ventured into the cave, the more uneasy I felt. The air grew heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the cavern. It felt like the cave was breathing. My flashlight beam struggled to pierce the thick darkness, and the shadows seemed to dance and writhe in the corners of my vision. I kept expecting to see something lurking just beyond the light, something with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. Then I heard it. A faint whisper tarried on the damp air. It sounded like voices, but not human voices. It was more like a chorus of whispers, a low, guttural chanting that seemed to come from the very walls of the cave. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained to listen, but the whispers faded, replaced by an eerie silence. I told myself it was just the wind, playing tricks on my ears. But deep down, I knew it was something more. As I pushed further into the cave, the sounds grew louder. The whispers became clearer, and I started to make out other noises, a scratching sound, like claws on stone, and the faint echo of something moving in the darkness ahead. My flashlight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the cave walls. I fumbled with the switch, my hands shaking. The beam died for a moment, plunging me into absolute darkness. Panic surged through me, and I frantically clicked the switch until the light flickered back to life. When I could see again, I noticed something strange. The air in front of me seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. And through the shimmering air, I could just make out a shape, a tall, slender figure, standing motionless in the darkness. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching me, studying me. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs felt like lead, and my voice was trapped in my throat. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished. The shimmering air dissipated, and the cave was plunged back into darkness. I was left alone, with only the echoing drip of water and the pounding of my own heart for company. I was shaking like a leaf, man. That figure, whatever it was, had freaked me the hell out. I wanted to turn back, but something kept urging me forward. Like I had to see what was at the end of this damn cave. So, I kept going, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The whispers and scratching sounds were getting louder now, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was seriously starting to regret coming in here. Then, I rounded a corner, and the cave opened up into a larger chamber. And that's when I saw them. Markings on the walls. They weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. Strange symbols and patterns carved into the rock face. They looked ancient, like they'd been there for centuries. Some of them were geometric shapes, circles, triangles, spirals. Others looked like, well, I don't even know how to describe them. They were like twisted, alien figures with too many limbs and eyes. I shone my flashlight over the markings, trying to make sense of them. But the more I looked, the more uneasy I felt. There was something wrong about them. Something deeply unsettling. They seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering light, as if they were alive. I reached out and touched one of the symbols, tracing its outline with my finger. It felt cold and smooth, like polished bone. As I touched it, I felt a jolt, like static electricity, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. I pulled my hand back quickly, my heart racing. What the hell were these things? Were they some kind of ancient language? Or something else? I had no idea, but I knew I didn't like them. They filled me with a sense of dread, like I was staring into the face of something evil. I took a step back, wanting to get away from the markings. But as I did, I noticed something else. There was a faint glow coming from the far end of the chamber. A soft, red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Curiosity, or maybe just plain stupidity, got the better of me. I had to see what it was. So, I took a deep breath and started walking towards the light, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The red glow was getting stronger now, pulsing like a beacon in the darkness. As I got closer, I realized it was coming from a small alcove in the wall of the chamber. I cautiously approached, my flashlight beam illuminating the space. And that's when I saw it. Sitting on a small rock ledge was a statue. It wasn't very big, maybe a foot tall, but it was strange. It was made of some kind of black, glassy material, like obsidian, and it was shaped like a humanoid figure, with long, slender limbs and a disproportionately large head. But the creepiest thing about it was the eyes. They were glowing red, just like the light I'd been following. They seemed to bore into me, watching my every move. I felt drawn to the statue, like it was calling to me. I wanted to touch it, to hold it in my hands. But something held me back. A deep, primal fear, warning me to stay away. I cautiously reached out a hand, my fingers hovering just above the statue's surface. It felt warm, almost hot, and it seemed to vibrate with a strange energy. I could feel a tingling sensation in my fingertips, like I was about to get an electric shock. I hesitated, my mind screaming at me to back away. But the urge to touch the statue was overwhelming. It was like it was hypnotizing me. Finally, I couldn't resist any longer. I gently touched the statue's head, my fingers tracing the smooth, obsidian surface. As soon as I made contact, a jolt of energy surged through my body. I gasped and stumbled back, my vision blurring. The cave seemed to spin around me, and the red eyes of the statue burned into my brain. I shook my head, trying to clear my vision. When I could see again, the statue was still there, its eyes glowing as brightly as ever. But something had changed. The air around it seemed to shimmer and distort, and the whispers in the cave had grown louder, more urgent. I knew I had to get out of there. Now! I stumbled back from the statue, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. The red ice seemed to burn into me, and the whispers in the cave were swirling around my head like a swarm of angry bees. I turned to run, but it was too late. A shape emerged from the shadows at the back of the alcove. It was tall and slender, just like the figure I'd seen earlier, but this time I could see it clearly in the red glow of the statue's eyes. It wasn't human. Its skin was pale and smooth, almost translucent, like stretched parchment. Its limbs were long and thin, ending in clawed hands that scraped against the rock floor. But it was the face that truly terrified me. It had no nose or mouth, just two enormous, black eyes that seemed to absorb all the light around them. The creature moved with an unnatural grace, gliding towards me like a specter. I was frozen in place, my legs refusing to obey my commands. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It stopped just a few feet in front of me, its eyeless face tilted slightly, as if studying me. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, examining my every thought and emotion. Then, it raised one of its clawed hands and slowly reached towards me. Its touch sent a wave of icy terror through my body. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the touch never came. I slowly opened my eyes, and the creature was gone, vanished into thin air. I was left alone in the chamber, with only the pulsing red light of the statue and the echoing whispers for company. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't alone in that cave. Something was watching me, something ancient and evil. And it was just waiting for the right moment to strike. I didn't waste a second. I turned and bolted, scrambling back the way I'd come. The whispers seemed to be right behind me now, urging me on, mocking my fear. I sprinted through the chamber, past the strange markings on the walls, not daring to look back. The red glow of the statue's eyes faded behind me, but I could still feel its presence, like a burning ember in my mind. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness closing in around me. I stumbled over rocks and slipped on the damp floor, my flashlight beam dancing wildly. I could hear the creature behind me, its claws scraping against the stone, its ragged breathing echoing through the cavern. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and my blood ran cold. The creature was gaining on me, its pale form a blur in the darkness. Its eyeless face was contorted in a silent snarl, its long limbs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. I whipped back around and pushed myself harder, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for rest. But I couldn't stop. I knew if I did, the creature would catch me, and it would be the end. The tunnel narrowed, forcing me to slow down. I squeezed through a tight passage, scraping my skin against the rough walls. I could hear the creature close behind me, its frustrated growls echoing through the confined space. Then, disaster struck. My foot caught on a loose rock, and I went sprawling. The flashlight flew from my grasp, clattering to the floor and plunging me into darkness. I scrambled to retrieve it, my hands frantically searching the cold, damp stone. But it was too late. The creature was upon me, its claws reaching for me, its foul breath hot on my neck. I cringed, bracing for the impact. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the creature's claws to tear into me. But the pain never came. Instead, I heard a deafening roar, followed by a shower of rocks and debris. I opened my eyes to see that a section of the tunnel had collapsed, burying the creature beneath a pile of rubble. Dust filled the air, choking me and making it hard to see. I coughed and sputtered, scrambling back from the cave-in. My flashlight, which I had miraculously managed to hold onto, flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows on the dust clouds. I could hear the creature thrashing beneath the rocks, its enraged roars muffled by the debris. But it was trapped. For now, at least. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I burst out of the cave entrance and into the cool night air. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. I lay there for a long time, just staring up at the starry sky, trying to calm my racing heart. Eventually, I managed to pull myself together. I was battered and bruised, my clothes torn and covered in dust. But I was alive. I looked back at the cave entrance, a dark maw on the side of the mountain. It looked peaceful, almost inviting, in the moonlight. But I knew the truth. Something evil lurked within those depths, something that I had barely escaped. I turned and stumbled away from the cave, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed. I didn't know what to do, who to tell. Would anyone believe me? Or would they think I was crazy? One thing was certain, I couldn't stay in the Smoky Mountains any longer. This place held too many dark secrets, too many terrifying memories. I stumbled back to the ranger station, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. I had to tell someone about what I'd seen, but who would believe me? I mean, a creature with no eyes and claws that could disappear into thin air? It sounded like something out of a horror movie. I found my boss, Ranger Bill, in his office. He looked up in surprise when he saw me, covered in dust and scratches. "What the hell happened to you?" he asked, his eyebrows furrowed. I hesitated, unsure how to explain. I found a cave, I stammered. There was something in there. Ranger Bill sighed. "Look, I know you're new to the Smokies," he said, "but you gotta be careful out there. There are bears, mountain lions, even the occasional bobcat. You can't just wander off the trails." But it wasn't an animal, I insisted. It was different. It had no eyes, and it... Ranger Bill cut me off. "Look, I appreciate your concern," he said, "but I think you just had a close encounter with a wild animal. It happens sometimes. Just try to stick to the marked trails from now on, okay?" I knew he wasn't taking me seriously. I could see it in his eyes. He thought I was just another rookie ranger, spooked by the shadows in the woods. I tried to protest, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain something that sounded so unbelievable? In the end, I just nodded and left his office. I felt defeated, alone. No one believed me. The next day, I went back to the cave. I had to see it again to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined it all. But when I got to the spot where I remembered the cave entrance being, there was nothing there. Just a solid wall of rock. I checked my map, my GPS, even my compass. I was in the right place. But the cave was gone. Vanished. I stood there for a long time, staring at the rock face, my mind reeling. Had I gone crazy? Was it all just a hallucination? Or was there something more sinister at play? I left the Smokies a few days later. Packed up my stuff, said goodbye to Ranger Bill, who still looked at me like I was a bit off my rocker, and hit the road. I didn't have any plans, no destination in mind. Just needed to get as far away from those mountains as possible. But it didn't matter where I went. The memories followed me. The whispers, the red eyes, the creature's eyeless face, they haunted my dreams, turning them into nightmares. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced that the creature was lurking in the shadows of my room. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, that I just had a bad experience, a close call with a wild animal. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The cave, the statue, the creature, they were real. And I couldn't escape them. I started seeing things. Shadows moving in the periphery of my vision. Hearing things. Whispers on the wind, scratching sounds in the night. I knew it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to go back to my old life, but it was impossible. I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't focus on anything. I was a wreck. One night, I was driving through a small town, somewhere in the Midwest. I was exhausted, my eyes heavy, my mind racing. As I drove past a wooded area, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A figure, standing at the edge of the trees. Tall and slender, with pale skin and long, clawed hands. I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a halt. I stared into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. But the figure was gone. I sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I knew then that I would never be free. The creature, or whatever it was, had followed me. It was out there, somewhere, watching me, waiting for me. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would find me again. The forest has always been my sanctuary. Ever since I was a kid, I'd spend hours wandering through the trees, fascinated by the sights, sounds, and smells of nature. It felt like home. So, becoming a forest ranger was a natural choice for me. I love the solitude, the quiet, the feeling of being completely immersed in the wilderness. Most days are pretty routine. I patrol the trails, making sure no one's lost or hurt, keep an eye out for any signs of fire or illegal activity, that kind of thing. Sometimes I help researchers collect data on the local wildlife. It's peaceful, honest work. My partner, Mark, and I have been working this section of the forest for years. We've seen it all, from lost hikers to grumpy bears to the occasional weirdo who thinks they can live off the land. Mark's a good guy, always cracking jokes and keeping things light, even when we're dealing with some difficult situations. But lately, things have been off. I've noticed a few things that just don't seem right. A couple of weeks ago, I found a dead deer near the creek. It had these weird bite marks, like nothing I'd ever seen before. And the animals have been acting strange, skittish, like they're spooked by something. I've even heard some weird noises at night, like branches snapping and, I don't know, almost like something crying. I mentioned it to Mark, but he just laughed it off. Said I was working too hard and needed a vacation. Maybe he's right. But I can't shake this feeling that something's not right in these woods. The next morning, I woke up with that same uneasy feeling gnawing at me. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just nerves, but it was like a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Mark was supposed to meet me for our morning patrol, but he was nowhere to be found. I checked his cabin, but it was empty. His truck was gone too. That wasn't like him at all. Mark was always punctual, almost to a fault. I tried calling his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. A wave of panic washed over me. Something was definitely wrong. I grabbed my gear and headed out, following the route Mark was supposed to be patrolling. I scanned the trail, looking for any sign of him, but there was nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign of a struggle. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. As the hours passed, my anxiety grew. The sun was starting to set, and the forest was getting darker. The shadows seemed to stretch out like long fingers, reaching for me. I could hear the wind whispering through the trees, and every rustle of leaves made me jump. I finally decided to head back to the ranger station and report Mark missing. I tried to stay calm, but my voice was shaking as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. They promised to send out a search party first thing in the morning. That night, I barely slept. All I could think about was Mark and what could have happened to him. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head, trying to remember if he'd said anything that might give me a clue. But there was nothing. Just that same uneasy feeling, growing stronger with every passing hour. Dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of gray and orange. I met the search party at the ranger station, a mix of park officials and volunteers, their faces etched with concern. We split into groups, each assigned a different section of the forest to comb through. I led my group towards the area where I'd last seen Mark, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. We searched for hours, calling out Mark's name, our voices echoing through the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath, watching us, waiting. Every fallen log, every dense thicket, fueled my anxiety. Was he injured? Lost? Or worse? Just as I was starting to lose hope, I spotted something glinting in the sunlight. It was Mark's ranger hat, lying on the ground near a cluster of bushes. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of fear. The hat was covered in blood. My blood ran cold. I knelt down, my hands trembling as I picked up the hat. The blood was still fresh, sticky. My eyes darted around, searching for any other sign of Mark. Then I saw it. A trail of blood leading deeper into the woods. My heart hammered in my chest. I motioned for the others to follow me, my voice a hoarse whisper. We moved cautiously, following the crimson trail, the silence broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. The trail led us to a small clearing. And there, in the center of the clearing, was a sight that made my stomach churn. Mark's backpack lay discarded on the ground, its contents spilled out. His radio was smashed, the antenna bent at an unnatural angle. And then I saw him. Mark was lying on his side, his uniform torn and bloodied. He wasn't moving. A scream caught in my throat. I rushed towards him, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. But as I got closer, a wave of nausea washed over me. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Mark's body, it wasn't just lying there. It was being held. Something was crouched over him, its back to me. It was huge, easily twice the size of a man, with thick, muscular limbs and a hunched posture. Its skin was a sickly pale color, almost translucent, and I could see dark veins pulsing beneath the surface. The creature was feeding on Mark. I could see its jaws working, tearing into his flesh. Blood oozed from the wounds, staining the ground crimson. The sight was so gruesome, so utterly horrifying, that I almost vomited. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there and watch. But my legs felt like lead, and my voice was stuck in my throat. I was paralyzed with fear. The creature suddenly stopped moving and lifted its head. I caught a glimpse of its face, and a wave of terror washed over me. It was a grotesque parody of a human face, with bulging eyes, a flattened nose, and a wide, lipless mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. Its skin was stretched taut over its skull, revealing the contours of the bone beneath. The creature's eyes met mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It stared at me for a moment, its gaze filled with a cold, predatory intelligence. Then, it let out a low growl, a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. I snapped out of my trance and turned to run. My legs finally obeyed, and I sprinted back the way we'd come, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back, but I could hear the creature moving behind me, its heavy footsteps crashing through the undergrowth. I burst out of the clearing and into the woods, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for rest. But I couldn't stop. I had to get away. The creature was still following me. I could hear its growls getting closer, its footsteps getting louder. I was running out of time. I scrambled through the trees, branches whipping in my face, thorns tearing at my clothes. I didn't dare slow down, not even for a second. The creature was still on my trail, its growls echoing through the woods like a death knell. I could hear it crashing through the undergrowth, getting closer with every passing moment. The sound of its heavy breathing filled my ears, a terrifying reminder of its relentless pursuit. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw its pale form moving between the trees, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. Panic clawed at my throat, threatening to choke me. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning, my legs aching. But I knew I couldn't outrun it forever. It was faster, stronger, and more relentless than anything I'd ever encountered. I stumbled over a fallen log, my ankle twisting beneath me. Pain shot through my leg, and I cried out, falling to the ground. I tried to get up, but my ankle throbbed, and I could barely put any weight on it. Despair washed over me. I was trapped. The creature's growls were getting closer. I could hear its heavy footsteps pounding the earth, feel the vibrations in my bones. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable. But the attack never came. I cautiously opened my eyes and saw the creature standing a few feet away. It was watching me, its eyes fixed on mine, its expression unreadable. It let out a low growl, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Then, it turned and walked away. I lay there for a moment, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I couldn't believe it. I was alive. But the relief was short-lived. I knew the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity. I was no longer safe in these woods. I managed to limp back to the cabin, my ankle throbbing with every step. The pain was excruciating, but the fear was worse. It was a cold, gnawing fear that settled deep in my bones, a constant reminder that I was now alone in these woods. I stumbled through the door and collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling with exhaustion and terror. I fumbled for the first aid kit and clumsily bandaged my ankle. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was becoming unbearable. I reached for my phone, intending to call for help, but then I hesitated. Who would believe me? What would I even say? I saw a monster eating my partner in the woods. They'd think I was crazy. Or worse, they'd think I was responsible. I threw my phone aside in frustration. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sent shivers down my spine. I kept imagining the creature lurking just outside, its eyes peering through the darkness, waiting for me to let my guard down. I couldn't stay there. The cabin felt like a tomb, a coffin waiting to be sealed. I needed to get out, to find somewhere safe, somewhere the creature couldn't reach me. But where could I go? The nearest town was miles away, and I could barely walk. Besides, even if I made it to town, who would believe me? I was trapped, both physically and mentally. The creature had not only taken Mark, but it had also taken my sense of safety, my sanity. I was no longer the confident, capable ranger I once was. I was a broken man, haunted by the horrors I had witnessed. Night fell, and the darkness pressed in on me like a suffocating blanket. I huddled in a corner of the cabin, clutching a hunting knife, my eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist, taking on monstrous shapes in my terrified mind. I hadn't eaten all day, but the thought of food made my stomach churn. I couldn't shake the image of Mark's mutilated body, the creature's jaws tearing into his flesh. The smell of blood, the sound of crunching bones, it all played on a loop in my mind, a gruesome horror movie I couldn't escape. I tried to distract myself, to focus on anything but the terror that consumed me. I turned on the radio, but the static only amplified the silence, the feeling of isolation. I tried to read, but the words swam before my eyes, meaningless and blurry. My mind was unraveling. I was losing my grip on reality, slipping into a dark abyss of fear and paranoia. Every sound, every shadow, seemed to be a harbinger of the creature's return. I jumped at the slightest creak of the floorboards, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw the creature's face in the flickering flames of the fireplace, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. I heard its growls in the wind howling outside, its footsteps in the rustling of leaves. I was going crazy. I knew it, but I couldn't stop it. The fear had taken root deep inside me, poisoning my mind, twisting my perception of reality. I was alone in the wilderness, surrounded by darkness and the unseen presence of the creature. I was a prisoner in my own mind, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. I couldn't take it anymore. The silence, the darkness, the constant fear, it was driving me insane. I had to do something, anything, to break free from this nightmare. I grabbed my hunting knife, the cold steel of comfort in my trembling hand. I knew it was a futile weapon against the creature, but it was all I had. It was a symbol of defiance, a way to reclaim some sense of control in this chaotic situation. I crept out of the cabin, my injured ankle protesting with every step. The moon was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds, casting the forest in an impenetrable darkness. I could hear the wind whispering through the trees, carrying with it the sounds of the night, the hooting of an owl, the rustling of leaves, the distant howling of a coyote. But beneath those natural sounds, I could hear something else. A low growl, barely audible, but unmistakable. The creature was out there, somewhere in the darkness, watching me. I moved cautiously through the trees, my senses on high alert. I scanned the shadows, searching for any sign of movement. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of fear echoing in my ears. Suddenly, I heard a twig snap behind me. I whirled around, knife raised, my breath catching in my throat. But there was nothing there. Just the shadows, dancing and shifting in the darkness. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. It was just my imagination, playing tricks on me. I had to stay focused, stay alert. But the feeling of being watched persisted. I could feel the creature's presence, a cold, malevolent aura that seemed to seep into my very bones. It was toying with me, stalking me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I couldn't let it win. I had to fight back, even if it meant certain death. I would not go down without a fight. I raised my knife, the blade glinting in the faint moonlight. "Come and get me," I whispered, my voice hoarse but defiant. "I'm not afraid of you." The forest held its breath. The wind died down, the leaves stopped rustling. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. Then I heard it. A low growl, closer this time, filled with a chilling hunger. The creature was coming. The growl ripped through the silence, closer now, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I gripped the knife tighter, my knuckles white, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The creature was close. I could feel its presence, a palpable weight in the air, a suffocating sense of dread. Then it emerged from the shadows. It was even more terrifying than I remembered. Its pale skin seemed to absorb the moonlight, its eyes glowed with an eerie luminescence, and its lipless mouth was twisted into a grotesque snarl, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. It moved with an unnatural grace, its long limbs carrying it effortlessly through the undergrowth. I stood my ground, my fear battling with a surge of adrenaline-fueled defiance. I raised the knife, the blade trembling in my hand. "Stay back," I yelled, my voice cracking with fear. The creature paused, its head cocked to one side, as if studying me. It let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated through my very bones. Then it lunged. I barely had time to react. I stumbled backward, my injured ankle giving way beneath me. I fell to the ground, the knife slipping from my grasp. The creature loomed over me, its shadow engulfing me in darkness. I scrambled backward, my hands scrabbling for the knife. The creature reached for me, its long claws raking the ground inches from my face. I kicked out, my foot connecting with its chest. The creature staggered backward, momentarily surprised. I seized the opportunity. I lunged for the knife, my fingers closing around the cold steel. I rolled to my feet, the knife raised in defense. The creature lunged again, its jaws snapping shut inches from my face. I ducked, the creature's claws tearing through my shirt. I slashed at it with the knife, the blade slicing through its pale skin. The creature roared in pain, its blood splattering on the ground. It stumbled backward, its eyes filled with rage. It lunged again, and again I dodged, slashing at it with the knife. We fought, a desperate dance of death in the moonlight. I was outmatched, outclassed, but I refused to give up. I fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, fueled by fear and adrenaline. Finally, I saw my chance. The creature lunged, its claws outstretched. I sidestepped, the creature's momentum carrying it past me. I plunged the knife into its back, the blade sinking deep into its flesh. The creature let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing. It stumbled, its legs collapsing beneath it. It crashed to the ground, its eyes fixed on me, filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I stood over it, my chest heaving, my body trembling. The knife was still embedded in its back, the blood flowing freely. The creature's breathing grew shallow, its eyes glazed over. Then it went still. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the creature's lifeless body. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me weak and trembling. My clothes were torn, my body was covered in cuts and bruises, and my ankle throbbed with a dull ache. but I was alive. I had survived. I looked around at the forest, the shadows seeming less menacing now, the silence less oppressive. The creature was dead. The nightmare was over. But was it really? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The creature was gone, but the fear remained, a deep-seated unease that clung to me like a shroud. I knew I would never be the same. I limped back to the cabin, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in hues of gray and orange. I gathered my things, packing only the essentials. I couldn't stay there, not anymore. The memories were too fresh, the fear too palpable. I left the cabin, locking the door behind me. I didn't look back. I walked for hours, my ankle protesting with every step. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to get as far away from that place as possible. Finally, I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car, and the driver, a kind-faced woman, agreed to take me to the nearest town. I didn't tell her what had happened. I didn't think she would believe me. I checked into a motel, the anonymity a welcome relief. I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the blood and the fear. But it was no use. The memories were etched into my mind, a permanent scar on my soul. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's face, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. I heard its growls, its footsteps, its dying roar. I knew I would never be truly free from the horrors I had witnessed. The creature was dead, but its presence lingered, a ghost in the shadows of my mind. I was a changed man. The forest, once my sanctuary, was now a place of fear and dread. I would never again walk among the trees without remembering the creature, without feeling its cold, predatory gaze on my back. I was a survivor, but I was also a victim of the creature and a victim of my own fear. I closed my eyes, the image of the creature burned into my mind. I wondered if I would ever be able to escape the darkness, or if it would forever haunt my dreams.